Okay, this is going to be an introductory video showing the basic layout of the Safan e-control software, and we'll go through the basics on this video, and in future videos we're going to go into details of the different sections, and let's get started. Okay, to begin with, the screen that opens up when you turn on the machine will depend. If it's a brand new machine, it'll probably show this screen. If not, it'll show any previous programs you did. But at any rate, you'll see up here we have a simple toolbar, which is for simple functions you might need, like logging in as a different user, system clock, help. PDF is accessible through here through a viewer. This button here just shows you how what your current version is, and this will turn off the software or the whole computer depending. This button has no function currently. This center window here, where I'm indicating with my mouse, will change depending on what selection you have down below here. And this area will depend. For instance, in this very first section, like we see here, is basically file management. You'll be able to start a new program, open an existing program, import some files. We can import from some Delum controls into older Safan controls. We can export to other controls, primarily Safan, maybe I believe the Delum. And then the management is just managing files, deleting files and moving files, what have you. As you can see here, we have selection 1 through 5, or 6 actually, this one doesn't count as its own, but if you're programming, you're going to work in these steps 1 through 5. This is just for getting to system parameters and so on. So you're usually working from left to right as you're programming the machine. You don't have to go in this order. You can select them as you wish. Once you've started, you can go back and forth. But if you're starting from a new program, you do have to work from the left to the right. It won't let you go further until you add certain things. Up over here, as you can see here, I'm going to show you this. This is for logging on. There's several login types that you can come into. Whether it's an operator, which has, the most basic access, won't let you change programs and alter settings and so on. And the higher up the ladder you go, the more access you have. And of course, service engineers is just for factory service. They have access to everything, of course. Each one of these would have their own login numbers, and this can be customized, and you can create your own. So very flexible, very, very handy feature. So that's what that section does. This does nothing more than set your clock in your calendar. And here you got access to your help files. If you open it up, basically it's a PDF file, and this goes through some of the basics. It's good for reference. But these tutorial videos will go in be a little easier to follow. So this is a good place to go to if you have some questions. Up here, like I said earlier, this just shows you the version software you have currently running, and a good place to do a backup and restore of your settings. Okay, and this last one, we won't actually do it, but I can close this application, get into Windows, or shut the computer down completely. Shuts off the whole machine. We'll pass on that right now. Okay. So as you start new programs, and actually I think we have one already loaded, I'm going to show you the 3 different sections. So after you start a new program, this is one of the first places you start on setting up your program, whether it's a numeric program or a profile program where you actually draw a shape. You're going to go through this window on either case. You'll define your materials here, you'll define your tools, and you'll pick from a database, a pending database that you'll create. So very simple, concise screen for initial setup. And I'll get into more details on this when I do a tutorial on how to make a program. So once you're done with this section, it works in the same order, left to right. You'll have these green check marks up here. When you first start a new one, there won't be, and you'll have to fill this out before you go into the next section, and so on. I can't move to step 3 until this screen has 3 green checks. Okay, so very important to remember. Okay, so now we're looking on step 3. Step 3 is basically to determine the tool that you'll be using. Okay, I can determine not so much the tools, but the segment size. You can define it here. I could say it's going to be just a 40-inch piece, and it'll reflect it. And then I could position it. We'll say at 20 inches. So I can move it around. I can also dictate the wheel of segments, move it around, flip a die if I need to, a punch and die, and so on. So that's what this screen's for. Like I said, in future tutorials we'll get into more detail. And if I want to add a tool, I could do so here as well. Okay, so now we'll move on to next step 4. So step 4, basically, once the tools are all defined, you get into more details. It'll have a 3D representation of the tools, the clamps, and the back gauge. And depending on how many steps you have in your program, and as we're starting out, the default will be 1 step. But if I have multiple steps, I have these tools over here to navigate forward and back. This will go straight to the front, to the beginning of the program, the first step. This one will take you to the last step. And these 2 white arrows will just step 1 step at a time. If I need to remove a step, I could use this one, or I want to add a step, I can add it here. And I'll get into more details on that in a future video. The important thing to know on this screen is these 4 guys up here. Basically, this first one will give me all the parameters for my y-axis, so my RAM. So I can have a retract dimension. I have how much to stop over the before the material. Our default's always 40, and so on. This is our penetration depth. This is the bend of the angle. This is the decompression setting and tonnage here, the width of the bend, and what mode I'm going to select for my light curtain. So this will have to do with mostly all the y-axis. These next selections will have to do with the other axis, depending on your machine. Everything is graphically illustrated. You can see here, this indicates the x-axis travel back here. So if I want to change it, click on it. I'll maybe make it 3 inches. Okay, and there you can see it graphically represent the back gauge at 3 inches as I posted here. So I will get feedback in my screen here depending on my selection. Okay, so this is for a delta X. This will be for the second finger if you have the option to, you could displace that, I believe, 1 inch in each direction, or 2 inches. And so on. So this will represent the other axis, X, Z, and R. So the placement, this is for the R axis, the height of the fingers. This is the placement of the fingers for the Z1 and Z2, side to side. And then retracts and so on, and where you're actually gauging from. So that's all these selections. These others are depending on your options. If you have additional axes or robotics and so on, that would use these 2 modes to select those options. Okay. For the most part, most people will just have these first 2. So if I want to add let's see, let's do a simple quick one here. We're going to make this just a 45-degree bend. Okay, everything else is already adjusted for me. I always take these defaults. I'm good to go. And maybe like that. This R-axis is at 0, meaning it's at the height of the tool, so it knows where it's at. So if it's at 0, it means the fingers are going to be at the height of the lower die. So I'm going to leave that be. And position of the fingers. Oops, let's close this out. Okay, so if I wanted to change the Z fingers, I'm going to move this one more over to like 40 inches. Okay, you can see that finger moves over, and we'll move this one over to, let's say, 50 inches. Okay, so I can play with these all I like. And now, if I'm going to add a step to this, I try to put in as much information as I can that will be repeating. And that way, when I add this, I'm going to create another step. It's going to ask me first here where do I want to put the step, at this spot, at the end, or I get to choose the step if I only have at the end to choose right now. So I'm going to hit at end. So we've got step 2 of 2, and it copies everything from the first step. So maybe on this one, I'm going to do a 90-degree bend. Okay, and I'm going to do a back gauge of 5 inches for the fingers. Okay, and that's my second step. So I can go on until the cows come home. I can do a lot of steps here. So that's pretty much what you'll be doing with this screen. This next step, step 5 here, is actually the run screen. This run screen is where we're going to be running our programs from. Since I'm doing this on a laptop, you can't see it because I don't have a machine connected to it. But I'll have similar settings here, a 3D representation, these same buttons here, and I can actually run the program from that. And you'll see that in a future video. And you'll be ready to run the program. The last step here is this one, which is our basically parameter screens, everything for adjustments, user adjustments. A lot of these others may have more to do with the service guys. They'll have access to this, and if you don't have access, it'll be grayed out. You won't be able to get in there, so you don't have to worry. But the one area you will worry or will interact with is this user setting. That's assuming you have permissions based on your login information here. Okay, but maybe users, I can adjust a variety of things, like which do I want, metric or US standards. Okay, language, I can choose a lot of language, and a lot of languages, and then where my home directory is, the startup project, the variety of things, even if it's a left-handed control or right-handed control. Now these will change based on your level of access, and you see this here because I'm logged in as a service tech. You won't be normally, but we could customize this so each operator has a login, be under his own name, but maybe he wants it in Spanish and another guy wants it in English. We could do that. So just basically by who logs in, we can customize all this. Very powerful feature, especially for large shops with lots of users. And so that's one area you could interact with. One area you may interact with, some general settings. I'm not sure how much you'll have access to, but if you want to cook up a printer, set the time and date, see some statistics. This is a material database that not everybody has access to. Service will. Maybe it'll open it up for users in the future. I can do backup and restores from here and so on. Tool library, that's an important one. We're going to do a library or a video on this one separately. But here I can indicate what tooling I have and what tooling I own. I can actually indicate my library which tool I own or don't own by just putting a check mark on there. But all complete libraries are in this machine. So, and we could also make a tool here custom, and like I said, that's going to be in a future video. So definitely an area of importance there. Machine is going to be mostly machine parameters and so on. You won't be accessing this much. So this is where you'll set up some settings, and we'll get into more details on future videos on what some of these other things will do. But that's just the basic navigation of this control. It's pretty straightforward, very simple, and easy to learn. So keep an eye out for additional videos. They'll come out in the future. Thank you.